AI has shifted automation from a nice to have to a strategic imperative. But there is a problem. Some recruiting teams are implementing automation poorly and destroying candidate trust, while others won't touch it at all, worried about losing the personal connection that actually fills roles. So, what should be automated and what must stay human? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Talent Pilot, the first end-to-end AI-native platform for recruiting. Let's be honest, no one becomes a recruiter to copy and paste CVs, chase feedback, or write interview notes. Talent Pilot is helping the role of the recruiter to quickly evolve from a junior, admin-heavy one to one of the most strategic roles in the entire organisation. With Talent Pilot, recruiters can build their own hiring workflows by deploying AI agents at different touchpoints of the recruiting process to source, screen, and select the best talent. They're offering a free demo for everyone who listens to Recruiting Future. So head over to talentpilot.com/Matt to experience the new era of recruiting. That's talentpilot.com/Matt, and it's Matt, M-A-T-T.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 755 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. We've been talking about automation in recruiting for a really long time. The AI developments of the last 2 years, though, have really shifted the needle on what's possible with automation, making it a strategic imperative rather than a nice to have. However, the current situation is pretty problematic. Some recruiters and TA teams are doing automation poorly, particularly in outreach, inundating candidates with generic, obviously AI-generated messages that all sound the same. Meanwhile, a significant number of recruiting teams are resisting automation entirely, worried about losing the human connection that actually fills roles. At the same time, in a world of AI sameness, brand, reputation, and genuine relationships with the talent pool are becoming the real competitive advantage and the key factor that actually gets candidates to respond. So, how do recruiters balance automation with authenticity while building the credibility that cuts through the noise? My guest this week is Mark Whitby, host of the Resilient Recruiter podcast. In our conversation, he shares what should be automated, what must stay human, why investing in your brand right now will determine your success in the future, and the role external recruiters can play in rebuilding trust in the hiring process. Hi, Mark, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Matt. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Just to start off with, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure. So I'm Mark Whitby. I am the founder of Recruitment Coach. For the last 25 years, I've trained over 10,000 recruiters in 34 countries. Now I mainly coach owners of boutique search firms and small staffing companies. I was an agency recruiter for 5 years before that. And I also host a podcast called The Resilient Recruiter.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about the podcast.
Yeah, so this is actually the favorite thing I do, and it's quite strange being on the other side of the mic today. But look, I have always sought out people who are excellent at what they do, and that's been really my journey of personal development, has been finding smart people who are, high performers and asking them lots of questions. And so I've been doing that, in my whole professional career. And in the course of my business, I meet so many incredible people, top billing recruiters, as well as owners of fast growing companies. And I'm having these really interesting conversations. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I just record these conversations and share them with a wider audience? Because I feel like a lot of other people could benefit from this. And it's just absolutely taken off. I started in 2019. We're coming up for our 300th episode. And it's a real, as you know, like I would do it even if there was no business benefit, because it's such a enjoyable way to learn and grow. So that's why I did it, but it's turned into quite a big thing.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very similar to my podcast story. Same thing, was having conversations, thought it'd be great to turn into a podcast. And, I've been aware of your podcast for quite some time. And we recently found out that we only live a few miles away from each other, which was a spectacular coincidence. East Lothian has got 2 recruitment podcasters in it. And, it was great to kind of meet up with you face to face in a world that is increasingly digital and, and online, effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy that we live in the same neck of the hoods, really.
So let's kind of talk about what's going on out there. So I want to start with AI, because it's illegal to have any kind of podcast and not mention AI. So let's kind of mention it right at the start. So I suppose the biggest use case that we've seen AI kind of applied to in the last 2 or 3 years has been automation. What's happening in the agency sector in terms of automation? What are you seeing? How has it been evolving?
Yeah, so automation is obviously not new, but is gaining so much traction. But the challenge, I think, Matt, is a lot of people are doing it badly, and the risk to that is, number one, it just results in candidates being inundated with generic AI sounding, messaging, which is ineffective, but also just dilutes, the channel for everyone. So I'm a big advocate for automation, by the way, in terms of saving time, provided it's done correctly, and we can maybe get into that in a minute. But I actually get a lot of resistance still from people who don't want to be automated because they're worried they're going to lose the personal touch. And my argument is actually that by automating as many things in your business, your job as possible, you actually free up more time to do the human stuff and to connect with people in person or over Zoom or over Teams, which is ultimately, it's those relationships that are going to help us to fill jobs and find the best candidates, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think there's 2 things you kind of really, really sort of nailed there. I think that there's that bad use of sales or marketing automation, those very generic kind of LinkedIn messages that go out there. It's kind of like a modern day version of the dear first name mistake that people used to make with the original kind of marketing automation systems. And, nothing is going to sort of disengage a candidate more than sort of those poorly thought out mass communications. But yeah, at the same time, I think that we've got to remember the key thing about recruiting is it's about humans and building relationship. And to me, this offers a spectacular opportunity for people to kind of really, really sort of focus on that. What do you think, what are the kind of essential human parts of the process? What is it that we need to sort of defend at all costs from automation and, AIing, as it were?
Well, so one part that I think could be interesting to zoom in on in the overall hiring process is the actual candidate engagement and outreach piece of it. Because, and here I see, it's no longer a challenge to identify talent, right? That data is available to everybody. The challenge is getting them to actually pay attention and to care about what you're trying to offer them and to respond, I guess, ultimately, right, is what we're trying to achieve when we've got a job that we need filled and we know who we want, we know what the profile is, but getting them to actually respond and start a conversation so we can get them into the hiring process. That is a major challenge. So where automation fits in versus the human stuff, I think it needs to be a blend. So a lot of recruiters, and I think this applies to both internal and external recruiters, they rely on, they've got their LinkedIn recruiter license and they rely on sending in mails. And that seems to be the primary channel for, getting communication with candidates. And I think that's very rudimentary. And there's so many other opportunities. So what we teach is a multi-touch, multi-channel outreach campaign across email, LinkedIn, as well as telephone, voice notes, and personalized video messages, supported by a content strategy as well. Okay, so in terms of what can be automated there, so the email and the LinkedIn messages can be automated. If we have time, we can get into like the do's and don'ts and how to make that not feel automated. But then the actual parts of the outreach that when you and I started in recruiting, Matt, were standard, like just picking up the phone and calling someone. That rarely happens anymore, right? And I think there's still a place for that. Where we can introduce the personal touch is with, for example, voice notes on LinkedIn, as well as personalized video. A lot of our clients are finding that is an extremely effective way of cutting through the noise and getting the attention of a candidate. It stands out in their LinkedIn inbox as well as their email inbox, and it's becoming more common, but it is still rare enough that it does get people's attention. It shows that you are making more effort to reach them. They get to hear your voice. They get your personality across better than just, the text of a short email message, which you can't really do justice to a job opportunity in a short email, right? It can only really tease or it's the bait that gets people to want to book a call to have a further conversation with you. Now, believe it or not, you can scale those video messages with AI, but in my opinion, that's a mistake because it doesn't quite work in the sense that now the voice is it is uncanny. You and I can clone our voices and it will sound just like Mark Whitby and Matt Alder. But the problem is when you try and clone the video and make it personalized, there's like it's like a badly dubbed movie where the mouth doesn't move, in time with the words, and there's just something off about it. So in my opinion, the video messages should still be recorded one at a time, but you can have a process where you batch record those. And so I think it's got to be a combination of automation, AI, and the personal outreach.
It's funny actually, because I actually got a video yesterday, nothing to do with recruiting. It was something that I'd kind of, this sort of furniture that we'd ordered, and I got exactly that kind of email. So it was kind of like, here we are, thank you very much for your order, with the dodgy lip syncing. And it was a bit like, well, I wish they kind of hadn't bothered. If they'd showed a picture of, they were packing my actual order or something like that, it might have resonated a bit more. But it just, as you said, it felt a little bit like Dear First Name.
It undermines the whole, like, if you're going to personalize something, but then people know that it's automated, it sort of undermines the whole, like, why bother?
Digging into, what you said earlier about very clear on what's personalized and bespoke and all that sort of stuff. But you said there is kind of mass automation here. What are the things that you tell people they should think about when they're doing that to make sure that it doesn't put people off or just sound like everyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things. First of all, the copy has to be good. And that's a very overlooked. I know you come from a marketing and advertising background, and it is copywriting is a skill in and of itself, and it's not one that talent acquisition folks probably spend much time thinking about or honing. Right? It is the ability to communicate effectively in text, like in print. That's a whole skill set, and I think that the risk of AI here is it gives people the sense that, they're now using ChatGPT or Claude to compose these messages, and they're still not very good is the problem. So we could do a whole podcast just about copywriting. So the message has to be good, because if you scale a bad message, it's like, that's not going to help anybody. The next thing to consider is the segmentation. I think actually segmentation trumps personalization. And what I mean by that is we need to be very clear on the persona that we're reaching out to. And so the messaging, like we need to think about who's the target candidate, what's the profile, and then really get inside that candidate's mind and think, okay, what are the challenges? What are the frustrations they're likely dealing with? What are the things they're dissatisfied in their current job situation? What are the things that, like, what are the reasons that they might be tempted to consider a new opportunity, and make it very specific to that industry, that job function? Because if we can write for that person uniquely rather than, about this industry in general, then that's really going to resonate with the recipient. And that is, if anything, more important than the personalization. Now, then, if you want to add the personalization in, what we can do is use, Claude or ChatGPT to, with very careful prompting, to try and look at their background, their career history, their LinkedIn profile, and pull out a few key things that you could say about that individual to show that this is them specifically that we're interested in talking to, and that we have done our homework and we've done our due diligence here to make it feel much more like it's a well thought out, personalized approach. But the personalization is really just a layer that we're putting on top. The core message itself has to be solid to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point about segmentation there. And I think if we sort of zoom out for this, all of this is really about trust. And so many kind of things have happened to really undermine trust in the recruitment process, and badly targeted spam messages is one of them. Candidate experience is another. Employer behavior. There's just so much going on. What's your take on the sort of the current state of trust in hiring?
Yeah, I think we're in a low trust, environment in the world in general, right? If you think of politics and you think of the media, the mass media, and people have lost faith in institutions and media, and with AI that's accelerated. So now you don't know what to believe anymore, right? And so going back to our outreach example, often who the message is from is more important than the subject line or the content, right, itself. And do I trust the person who is sending me this message? And so that's why I think we talk a lot about employer branding. I think every leader in businesses and every talent acquisition professional needs to also really think about building their personal brand, because that is going to be a significant factor as to whether or not the candidate responds. Is not just how good is the message and how personalized and targeted it is, but who is sending me this, and are they credible, right? And if we can actually build a relationship with our market, and by market, I mean, let's say the talent pool, in advance, before we approach them about a specific opportunity, then that's going to significantly increase the response rate that we get when we do tap them on the shoulder and invite them to apply for a position. So I think trust is crucial, and that needs to be built over time by showing that you're A, a real human being, and B, you're a credible expert in whatever domain that you're recruiting in.
I think it's really interesting. And also what I think is interesting is the role that agencies can play in this as agencies evolve. So how are agencies evolving? What is their kind of role in this trust puzzle? Where do they fit in with employers? How do you see this sort of panning out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the key things that we teach and encourage all of our clients to do is become more and more specialized. And so I think it fits in with what we were talking about earlier about how the messages have to be super targeted, but also the sender needs to be positioned as an expert in that domain, whether it's a functional area or a specific industry sector, or even a combination of both. So specializing in a function within an industry. So I think one of the challenges for talent acquisition is that you have so many jobs across all parts of the business that we need to fill, and having a specialist recruiter who really understands that market, but then also has the relationship already with those candidates and has a brand within that space means that they're going to get a much higher response potentially than somebody who doesn't already have a reputation in that space, if that makes sense. So I think that's one way where internal and external agencies can partner in a mutually beneficial way.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And is that shake-up for the agency industry? Because what you're kind of describing, I've had lots of experience over the years working with some great agency recruiters and headhunters who do exactly that kind of stuff. And that to me is almost like, that's what, when people talk about old school recruiting before technology and the internet, that to me is what that is. It's that expertise, that specialism, that building relationships. But across the whole agency market, there are obviously lots of agencies that aren't like that, and there's volume recruitment and all these kind of things. How do you see, the kind of market as a whole sort of being effective or evolving as we have more kind of automation and the process changes?
Yeah, I think that all recruiters, internal and external, going to need to evolve in order to stay relevant to clients and candidates, because expectations of everybody, including candidates, is just so much higher now. But to your point, it's interesting. I think it has sort of come full circle in that what agency recruiters now have to offer is reputation, relationships with a talent pool within a specific industry, and therefore greater access to getting the ear of those candidates and getting them to pay attention. So we've kind of gone full circle because now everybody can automate outreach at scale and use AI to personalize. So I think we're going to get to a point in the next couple of years where candidates just receive perfect messages in their inbox that are, researched and written by AI, that it's almost going to become noise again. So I think there's a window of time right now where this kind of thing, automation and personalization at scale, is still a competitive advantage. But we're quickly getting to a place where it's going to come back to personal relationships and having a reputation and a brand in the specific industry you serve. Those are the people who are going to be able to get candidates interested in jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting because sort of a few weeks back, I saw Professor Scott Galloway talking at Unleash World in Paris. And, he does a lot of stuff around AI and trust and all those kind of things. And the three things that he really zeroed in on that he felt that people needed for, their future careers were, first of all, understanding the tools, how they work. But the other two were a network and storytelling to build relationships and build trust. And I think that's exactly what you've just said, exactly the same thing. So I think I think they're really the things that everyone needs to focus on. So just kind of finally, I suppose, wrap this up for us. Where do you think recruiting's going? What might we be looking at the recruiting process being like in a few years' time? Where's the revolution? Where's the evolution?
So I think that recruiting actually has a bright future in a couple of respects. Number one, I think there's going to be a huge skills shortage in the emerging areas that, like, we've both heard the stat that a lot of the jobs that people are going to be doing in 5-10 years haven't been invented yet, right? And so there is going to be an incredible demand for people with the right sorts of skills. And so I think that's going to keep internal and external recruiters very, very busy. I do think the future is an evolution of what we've described today, right? Which is humans want to deal with humans, and that element of trust is going to become increasingly important. So our listeners should really think about starting now, if you haven't already, sort of started building that personal brand through posting content on LinkedIn, attending industry conferences, putting yourself out there on video. Start doing that now, because the expression, when's the best time to plant a tree 100 years ago, when's the second best time is right now. So I think the people who invest in building their reputation and their brand now are going to be the ones who capture the lion's share of the business and the talent in the future.
I could not agree with you more. Mark, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks, Matt. That was fun.
My thanks to Mark. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.